So last week, I talked about what would be the last evidence that we ever existed. That covered a lot of ground, obviously, but somehow this ties in to a lot of the questions in today's lightning round video, even though these questions came in before I made the last video. So if you didn't catch last week's video, I might recommend you go do that first. Otherwise, just stick around, because we're going to be talking about everything from galactic collisions to the Mayan calendar, from disaster preparedness to turning your head into an antenna, from terraforming to whatever this is. For any new people watching this, this is what we call a lightning round video. This is where I take questions from Patreons and channel members, supporters who support at a certain level. They submit questions, I answer those questions. These are not deep dives into these topics, more hot takes, lightly researched. And but if it's a topic that you really want to see a big deep dive on, just shout it out in the opinion pit down below. Many questions from lightning round videos have become very popular, normal videos. So let's see if any popular videos come out of this one today. Let's get into the first question. Philip Shane asked, Joe's video on Gobekli Tepe got me started on a deep fascination with the place. I'd never heard of it before. Joe, what's your favorite of the objects found at Gobekli Tepe? Again, I brought up Gobekli Tepe in last week's video. So I did a video on Gobekli Tepe. We can pin it up here for you to go watch it and see the whole thing. But it's been a couple years now, and the thing that I remember the most about what was found there were the T-shaped pillars that have, animals and deities and whatnot etched into them. As far as objects go, I don't remember any of them standing out, but let me take a quick look. So just pulling up some images of artifacts here from last week's video. If IYKYK. And, oh, hey, yeah, look at that. They're everywhere. Keeps going. Yeah, I remember the vulture sculpture was really an important one. One of them that I remember impressed by, this. Right here, okay, so this little jaguar-looking thing, I just always thought that was really cool and just like well designed. Maybe this is a better look at it. Just the carvings of the animals, the fact that it's not carved into the rock, but it's like carved out of the rock, I think is really interesting. I'm just really impressed by that skinny, ferocious looking cat thing. That's kind of cool. Is that like the Avatar of the Last Airbender? What is it? The Arkansas Razorbacks. Oh, but this was actually, I remember I didn't actually talk about this in the Gobekli Tepe video, but there was like a skull cult that was found there. I remember they found all these skulls that had like art all over them. I got some trepanning going on there. Here's a whole video, modified human skulls at Gobekli Tepe. Not mine, but go watch it if you want. So yeah, Turkish site reveals more evidence of Neolithic skull cult. Fragments of 3 skulls carved with flint after being scalped and defleshed. Nothing like a defleshed skull. So, okay, thousands of pieces of human bone were found, including sections of skulls bearing grooves, holes, and the occasional dab of ochre. All right, so it says that like there were grooves and holes cut purposefully into the skulls that were not as beautiful as the people and animals that decorate the limestone pillars. But it says that those who spent time at the site, there's little evidence people lived there, may have commemorated their ancestors by suspending their skulls or displayed the skulls of their enemies. So yeah, on top of all the crazy cool stuff that they found at Gobekli Tepe, they found a bunch of skulls, and it's thought that they decorated them either to honor or villainize certain people. So, I mean, what's my favorite artifact? I mean, it's kind of hard to top decorated skulls that they hung around their houses like you do. Yeah, I feel like it's almost wrong for it to be anything but the skulls that were formerly human beings. So I'll say the skulls. All right, Mark Hoffman asked, any idea as to how a car's key fob, by putting it against your head, can make it work at a longer range than just holding it out? I've tried it on multiple makes models of mini cars, and it seems to nearly always work. Yeah, you, sir, seem to have stumbled onto one of those internet conundrums that nobody can stop talking about. So I think a lot of this got set off by a Top Gear episode several years back where they showed how this worked, and everybody was like, why does that work? Because everybody started trying it themselves, and it worked, and it's like, what's going on here? I even came upon this thread in the Physics Stack Exchange where somebody was asking why it happened. This person, he was saying, I was trying to unlock my car with a key fob, I was out of range, a friend of mine said to do the thing, so I tried it following that later day, I walked away from the car until I was out of range, put the key next to my head, and it worked, put the key on my chest, and it worked, put the key on my leg, it didn't work. So anyway, this guy talks about it, and then this other person followed up with all this sciencey stuff, talking about the RF frequency and like how that resonates between different cavities of the body. And then he followed up later by actually doing a full experiment and sharing his results, and there's pictures of it and everything. But he came to the conclusion through this experiment that the remote seems to work better when held to the head though the improvement isn't as marked as one might have expected from a Google search of the topic. The best possible orientation seems to be to hold the remote flat against your temple. If you aren't willing to hold it to your head, pointing it at the vehicle seems to work better than pointing it up, and there doesn't seem to be much dependence on how high you hold it. Finally, holding the remote to your chest is worse than just holding it at arm's length. So it does seem to work, and there's been a lot of speculation as to why this works. Some suggested it is just because you're holding it up higher than you would be down here. Some people have suggested that maybe your skull and or your brain works as a reflector, so it's like directing the energy away from where you are instead of it going all in one thing. It kind of reflects out that way. For all those people with concave faces. Some suggested, and this was kind of interesting, that the RF antenna in those key fobs are a loop antenna, and that by doing this, you're creating essentially a bigger loop for that signal to pass through. But the answer seems to be, as they showed in this 60 Symbols video a while back, I'll put this link down below, that it's really about the water, especially the salt water, in the fatty tissue of your brain that increases the conductivity of that signal. Like here he's showing how it also works if he does it with just a jug of salt water. So it's basically just that you have a lot of fat and salty, bacony stuff in your head. Dylan Parker asks, do you think terraformation will ever become a viable option for humanity? If so, how long until we see this happen? And what planet or moon will be the first likely candidate? Okay, I feel very strongly that terraforming is absolutely vital for the long-term survival of our species, and the first place that we should terraform is planet Earth. Okay, so again, piggybacking off of last week's video, I talked about how in the deep, deep future, someday the sun is going to go red giant, and it will wind up swallowing the whole orbit of the Earth. The Earth won't be a thing anymore, so to not be here would be preferable. But we're talking billions of years in the future. Like long before it actually goes, red giant, which itself is going to take millions and millions of years to happen. But long before that, the sun is going to increase in intensity, and the heat here on Earth is going to become uninhabitable long before the sun ever swallows the Earth. But we're far more likely to get wiped out long before that because of some kind of sudden climate change. Now, before people start getting triggered about me saying that phrase, I'm going to point out what so many people love to point out in the comments, that yes, the climate is always changing. Yeah, when you look back over millions of years, it has swung wildly from uninhabitable heat to literal snowball Earth, where the entire planet was just covered with glaciers for 10 million years. Except for, as you can see in this closer graph here, this one little period right at the end in the last 10,000 years where it's been freakishly stable. And it just so happens that we had an agricultural revolution right about that time, and we've been able to become what we are because of it. So there's a big project I've been working on. You'll be hearing about it soon. But one thing that I've learned through this project is that the cozy, comfortable Earth that we live on right now is a very temporary thing. So whether we change it, we are, or it just changes itself for one reason or another, it is going to change. It is not going to stay this way. The planet that we are adapted to is going to turn into something we are not adapted to. So I did a video last year on a concept that I called the global thermostat. I'm not the first person to come up with that, but it's the idea that we build a massive infrastructure of CO2 scrubbers that can optimize the composition of our atmosphere. It's simultaneously ridiculous and I think inevitable. Whenever I talk about stuff like this, people always say, just plant more trees. Well, mathematically, trees are not enough to soak up the CO2 that we have pumped into the atmosphere. We're just doing it on such an industrial scale that the only way to remove it is through an industrial scale process. I know not everybody is on board with me on this. It's a bit of a hot take. It's kind of a hill I'm going to die on, apparently, but I just see it as inevitable, as something that we are going to have to do in order to adapt to the way this planet is going to change. It would be massively expensive, but we're talking long-term strategy here, so it could take place over the next 100, 200 years to get this thing built up, and it doesn't have to be like this major influx of money right all at once. There would, of course, be maintenance costs and all that. I'm simplifying it, of course, but I just see it as something that's going to have to be necessary at some point. It would make our own Earth more habitable for longer, which might give us more time to figure out how to do actual terraforming of places like the Moon and Mars, maybe Titan. Not to mention all the things we would learn by doing it here on Earth, we would be able to do up there. Pillory me in the comments. I'm sure it started already. Ashbale asked, assuming humans survive to see the Andromeda Galaxy merge with our Milky Way galaxy, will our solar system be pummeled by new asteroids or take on new planets that causes catastrophes? Again, I swear, these questions were asked before I made the last video. So yeah, per my last video, I talked about this there, that randomly there's two things that are going to happen in about 5 billion years. Now, I know we're talking about a huge span of time, so it's not like exactly at one point, but two specific things are going to happen at about the same time. The sun will reach peak red giant phase, like I was talking about, and two, the Andromeda Galaxy is going to collide with the Milky Way galaxy. So the point is, I can kind of guarantee that Earth won't be smacked by some other celestial object because it won't exist anymore at that point. Yeah, this is not a problem we're going to have to worry about, unless we terraform another planet. Also, random fact, the sun apparently orbits the Milky Way every 500 million years, so in 5 billion years, by the time it swallows the Earth, we will have circled the Milky Way 10 times. But I get the gist of your question. If we're merging with another galaxy and there's, stars flying around and stuff, could that wreak havoc on the stability of the solar system? And I would say that, again, the solar system stability is already going to be in a bit of a flux because of the sun going red giant. But, they say that the distances between stars is so vast that the most likely thing is that the two galaxies would collide and merge and whatever, and we would never actually get that much closer to any other stars. I think, from what I read anyway, definitely the chance that like another star might collide with our star is extremely low, but it is possible that we might get close enough to another star that it might just kind of disrupt our gravity well, enough anyway that it could dislodge a lot of like icy objects out in the Oort cloud and send a rain of comets coming down. But again, it'll be coming down on Mars and Jupiter and Saturn because Earth will be melted at that point. But anyway, even if that should happen, that wouldn't happen overnight. That would be over the course of millions of years. So any future versions of ourselves or alien species that are around to see it, it wouldn't be like a big shooting gallery. It would just be like a normal thing that's just part of their lives at that point. All right, Cole Parker asked, do you think that a nuclear-powered hot air balloon could float for years in the upper atmosphere of Venus, i.e. a mini cloud city from Bespin? Yeah, this, I want to see this happen. I have been saying this for years. Yes. Venus would actually be a lot easier to colonize than Mars for several reasons. One, a flight to Venus might take 3 or 4 months versus like 6 to 9 months for Mars. Venus's gravity is almost exactly the same as here on Earth. And yes, it does have this punishing atmosphere that is like 1,000 times more pressurized than here, but buoyancy. As you stated, if you have a craft that doesn't even have to be lighter than air, it could just be the same as air, even heavier than air, and it could float above the heaviest part of the Venusian atmosphere. In fact, it would just kind of float at around-ish 1 atmosphere. Now, we wouldn't be able to breathe that 1 atmosphere, but that still simplifies a lot of things in terms of how we construct and what kind of suits we would need to wear and that kind of deal. Venus also has a lot more solar energy than Mars. So when you say a nuclear-powered balloon, you probably wouldn't need a nuclear-powered balloon. There'd be plenty of sun above the atmosphere as you're floating up there to power everything. And besides, you're probably hearing that and you're saying, yeah, but, rotation of the planet, it would be nighttime, something would have to power it when the sun isn't on. When the sun isn't on. But, funny thing about Venus, it actually kind of rotates backwards very, very slowly. Yeah, 1 rotation of Venus takes 243 days. On Earth, 243 Earth days. That's how long it takes for Venus. So you could just float on the surface and just stay on the sun side, probably indefinitely. I'm sure there are atmospheric things, currents that might blow you around that you would have to fight against. I'm simplifying it, obviously. But yeah, NASA actually had a plan for this that came out about 10 years ago, 2014, I want to say, and it was called HAVOC, the High Altitude Venus Operational Concept. That is peak anagram. But yeah, the idea was it would, burn through Venus's atmosphere, deploy a parachute, open up a giant blimp thing. You can see the solar panels on top here. And as it would equalize with the pressure of the air, it would just naturally, through buoyancy, float back up to the top. I actually like this animation. It kind of like goes down and then pops back up again. After it shows this random person. Triumphantly entering the Venusian atmosphere. But again, like, I don't think that you would be staring at a sunset. You would probably want to be on the sun's side so that you could absorb all those photons. And here the way they show it is that it would be like a rocket, almost like a Virgin Orbit kind of thing. It would just deploy from below and then take off and then reconnect up in orbit, come back home. But yeah, I'll link to their whole PDF, their whole paper on this down below, and it gives a lot of really good background as to why this would be a great idea. And especially now that we're seeing more research into inflatable space station designs like Bigelow used to do, now Sierra Space is doing. Orbital Reef is a big part of that kind of research. Now that we're seeing these inflatable craft made with this incredibly strong, flexible material, I feel like that opens up more opportunities to do something like this. I want to see it happen. You say, why? Could we do it? Not only do I say, could we do it, we should do it. I think it would be amazing. Natsar asked, we've seen the future in the Maya calendar. Have we found any new fun predictions from the Mayan calendar? So I've never really covered the Mayan calendar. I did do a really cool video, or at least I thought it was very fun to me, about why we don't have metric time. And in that, it kind of worked through like how we got to the calendar that we have today, the Gregorian calendar or whatever. And I covered some other types of calendars and timekeeping standards in that video, but I didn't really get into the Maya calendar. And I maybe should do a full video on it because it's super complicated and really, really interesting. There's no other calendar in the world like it. So I'm gonna talk about it briefly here, but it's a very high-level overview. The Mayan calendar is really confusing because for lots of different reasons. For one thing, they just counted differently than us. They used a base 20 system instead of the base 10 that we use. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it wasn't just a calendar. It was actually 3 different calendars that all kind of worked together. And those 3 different calendars worked almost as more like a zodiac kind of thing, like a Chinese calendar, but also as a regular date numbered calendar from a specific time that I'll get to in a second. But the third thing about it, and probably the most important for the purposes of talking about predictions, is that it was a cyclical calendar. It was a calendar that worked in cycles. It didn't just have like an indefinite forward movement of linear progression of time like we measure with our calendar. It was a calendar that worked in cycles. Part of that was to predict astronomical events. Sometimes it was a predictor of different generational things. But the reason why they predicted things in the future wasn't necessarily because they were like really good at it. They weren't Nostradamus or whatever. It was because their calendar would repeat over and over again. So they would predict that this would happen because the calendar was repeating. And yeah, one of the main cycles called the long count that I'll get to in a second, it ended in 2012. And that's why there was all this, stuff around 2012 that the world was going to end or whatnot, because everybody said the Mayan calendar was ending. But it didn't end. It just started a new cycle. So this is a site called the Maya Archaeologist. I will put this link down below so that you can go dig through this yourself because it's really interesting. But there were 3 different calendars here. There was the sacred calendar, or the Zolkin. This one lasted 260 days. We don't know exactly why they picked 260 days, but it is also about 9 months, about the length of a pregnancy. Might have had something to do with it. So you had the sacred calendar, and then you had the solar calendar. This is more like the calendar that we're used to. It deals with the sun. It's a 365-day calendar. And then they had the long count calendar. So this is the third one. This is the one that recycled, I guess, in 2012. And as it says here, in the same way that like our Gregorian calendar starts from the assumed birth of Christ, this one started on the 13th of August, 3114 BC. That was their date of creation. But yeah, this long count calendar lasts 5,128 years, and it's repeated indefinitely. So the one that ended in 2012 was actually their 13th cycle, or Baktun is what they call it. So I guess now we're in the 13th Baktun. I don't know if we're just now in it or the last one ended. But anyway, what's ironic about that, or what's interesting about that, is if you do the math, if you have 13 Baktuns that last 5,128 days, it gets you back about 60,000 years, which they believe people entered North America around like 20 or 30,000 years ago, but that number keeps getting pushed back. How interesting would it be if their actual creation started just about the same time that people came over that land bridge? That'd be wild. But this is a really cool visualization of how it worked. You had like you had like the inner calendar. That was the sacred calendar. You had the solar calendar on the outside, and they all click together with this long count calendar. So every single day of your life would have its own specific date. Like you wouldn't have, January 27th of one year and January 27th of the next year. Like each day of your life would have a specific reference. Now, they didn't actually have big wheels like this. They used a flat stone thing, but this kind of gives you a better idea through it being like a gear. But yeah, because these were cyclical calendars, they were really good at predicting astronomical events. There's a chance that they predicted various crises in their civilization, various wars and things like that, which makes me think a lot about the video that I did on accelerationism, where I talked about Strauss-Howe generational theory, which there's a lot of people that think it's basically astronomy for political people. But I do think there is something to how different generations respond to a crisis, and then the crisis creates this generation with a certain set of values, and that generation creates another generation that reacts to that generation's values, and so on and so on and so on. So we don't think of time or our calendar as a cyclical thing, but they very much did. So little patterns in society that they see going through like that could take on a lot more relevance to them. I should point out though, like there are people today in Mexico that still use this calendar and go by this calendar and have each day using a different title, which is kind of cool. But yeah, again, that was super high level. I'm putting the links to these things that I was showing that explain it. It's and if you want to see a full explainer video on it, I would be happy to dive into it. It's just way more than I could get into right now. It's really interesting actually. All right, Rafe Zero Humor Singer asked, what reasonable steps can I take to protect my home electronics from a high-altitude EMP burst? Okay, 2 words, Rafe. Rabbit hole. Both in the sense that I had no idea that EMP preparedness was such a thing until I looked it up, but also because living underground in a rabbit hole might help. Okay, for anybody who doesn't know what an EMP burst is, it stands for electromagnetic pulse, and it's basically a burst of energy that just fries electronic components. Like, I think a nuclear weapon kind of naturally releases an EMP as part of its, explosion. But it doesn't necessarily have to be an EMP. Like, you saw things like this in The Matrix and other stories where they had to, disable a computer or something. They do an EMP burst. Oh, in Ocean's 11, he called it a pinch, didn't he? Yeah, they had to, blow up this thing to, destroy the computer. But anyway, I ran across a whole bunch of companies that created bags, Faraday bags. So a Faraday cage is basically a mesh cage that would absorb all of that energy and funnel it away from the components themselves. And there's a ton of companies out there making cases for computers, Faraday bags that you can put your computer stuff in. Like, here's an article from a company called SLNT, maybe Slant is what it's supposed to stand for, but that's what they do is they sell protective electronic stuff for EMP attacks, and they've got bags that they sell and stuff that you can put your phones in to keep it from frying. I looked up to see if there were any Faraday tents. There are small ones that could go over, say, like a greenhouse or a shed or something like that. I didn't see any that you could put into your house necessarily. Although they do sell right here on Amazon this Faraday fabric that's made of all the wires that you need to protect yourself. And I did read in some forums and stuff, people were asking, if I were to, build a new home construction, could I put a Faraday cage in the home to protect it from an EMP? And you could, but you would also basically never be able to use your phone. So, if an EMP is something you're really concerned about, you might want to invest in some bags, and, if, an alarm goes off or whatever, it might be something you just throw your stuff into. And obviously any hard drives, any computers that you rely on, you would want to protect those. But outside of that, really the main risk is that it would fry the entire electrical grid and that you would be without power for days, maybe up to weeks. And the thing is, that's not specific to an EMP attack. That could be for any kind of natural disaster or any kind of global attack. So you probably should have some kind of plan in place. We probably all should have some kind of plan in place for what to do if the power were out for a week or so. I used to think people were nuts to stockpile canned goods in their cellars and stuff, but I don't know. I don't think it's that crazy anymore. I think it's kind of smart to have a backup just in case. All right, we got one more question, but before I get to it, let's shout out some channel members and Patreon supporters who have signed up in the last month. We got a whole bunch to get through, so let's bring Zoe out to grace them. All right, first we've got East Coast Angela, Grace Kirby, Jen K, Aaron Crone, Dave Rankin, Alice Nilsson, Jernot Coons, Alex Takansugi, Ash Bale, Jessica Warner, Frank Mahan, Fernando Silver, Jen Ellen Hardim, Althea Padre, Andy Watchio6, Melissa Vandridge, Dylan Parker, Ricardo Rodriguez, Mark Tompkinson, Alexander Houston, Necro Monster, Nasa, Derek L. Lee, Mr. Normer, Wicked Daddy, Nicolaj Frey, and Bastion Fox. Those are new Patreon supporters. For members, we got Annalicia Roethlisberger, Sparty Pants, AJ Campbell, Nathan Jones, Quick Flash, Nomi Lynn, Cameron Schrader, Carolyn, Terry Lee, Akuma Kuna, Link's Uncle, Victor Salayu, Skella Shooter, Stony9599, Josh Lamb, Z Doctor, A Sack of Gravy, Tom the Wildcat Fan, I Love Goats, Wafer Waffles, Gabriella Grace, and a dash. A single dash. Alright, thanks to you guys for signing up. If you would like to join them and become part of an awesome community, get shouted out in a video like this, or maybe even ask a question, you can go to patreon.com/answerswithjoe, or just click the Join Now button down below to become a YouTube member. Thank you guys so much. Next up, Donna Sawyer asked, it seems like almost every new ad for a drug discloses side effects that seem to be worse than the condition or at best on par with the illness. What's going on here? Are new drugs getting worse, or is the advertising getting more truthful? I feel like we can rule out advertising being more truthful. But no, I feel like the number of side effects that are listed in prescription drug ads have always been kind of ridiculous, but we're just seeing a lot more prescription drug ads now. Like the whole, 30-second ad is like 10 seconds of talking about what the drug can do and then 20 seconds of side effects. I remember people making jokes about that in the 90s. That's not a new thing. What I do think is new, or increasingly worse, is just the number of pharmaceutical ads on TV. I swear it's just like most of what you see now. So I actually don't watch a lot of like old school TV anymore. When I do, I use YouTube TV. I just pick that service instead of using cable because I'm, cut the cord a long time ago. I either watch that or I watch like Hulu, and these do have like targeted ads on there. And I don't know if they're just like running more ads in general, or if I'm being targeted with more prescription drug ads because I'm not exactly a spring chicken anymore and I'm in that demographic now. I'm really more of a summer chicken at this point. Like, I wonder if somebody else with a different account watching Hulu or YouTube TV would be getting completely different ads because algorithm. Or, maybe the only people watching live TV anymore are the boomers and the Gen Xers, and that's the demographic that is going to, respond to prescription drug ads. I think the bigger question is, why do we do prescription drug ads in the first place? I think we're the only country that does it. There might be like one or two others random out there that do it, but like we're like the only country that does it. And I think that's something that people who come over here are always blown away by. It's like, why are you getting all these prescription drug ads? Like, what's even the point of advertising something that you can't get without a doctor's permission? Like, I'm old enough to remember when those first started and everybody thought it was ridiculous. I'm old enough to remember when bottled water, like Evian bottled water, first became a thing. And people were making jokes about that. It's like, you get it out of your faucet. Why would you spend money on bottled water? That's the most ridiculous thing in the world. These things just become normalized over time, I also find I'm old enough now that the prescription drug ads aren't funny anymore. Like, I used to watch, commercial where old guy has to wear a diaper because he can't control his bladder, and I'm like, it's hilarious, old guy can't control his bladder. But now I watch those commercials and I'm just like, that would really suck. So I hate that there's so many pharmaceutical ads, but mostly I hate that they are starting to speak to me. So that's the answer to that question, but by the way, there is one more thing that I'm adding to that question, but you can't see it here. Not here anyway. It's over on Nebula. Which I actually do that with every video over there. In place where I would normally have a sponsor read like this one, I put a Nebula Extra Fact. I even have a theme song for it. Nebula Extra Facts! So not only do you not have sponsor reads to deal with, or YouTube ads, no ads whatsoever for that matter, I put extra content in my Nebula videos, and I actually usually release them earlier there. Sometimes it's only a few days early, but it is early. I'm trying to get a week ahead. My whole team is laughing at me right now. By the way, sometimes I release entire extra videos on Nebula to add context or go down a tangential rabbit hole, and these only live on Nebula. You can't see them anywhere else. Also only on Nebula are my exclusive Nebula series, like the Mysteries of the Human Body series and my Forgotten Atrocities videos. What's really amazing is it's not just me. I'm not the only one putting exclusive content on Nebula. We have a couple hundred incredible, thoughtful creators making original series like the Modern Conflict series by Real Life Lore, Neo's excellent Underexposure series, and The Getaway from the Jetlag guys. I can also recommend the Boomers documentary by Tom Nicholas. I watched it recently, it was excellent. And there's also some other things that are going to be announced this year that I can't talk about. It's going to be really cool. So most normies can sign up at Nebula with $5 a month for an annual plan, but you, beautiful people, can get 40% off when you click the link in the description or scan this here QR code. That'll give you a full year for $36 or just $3 a month. Also, just throwing it out there, they do have a lifetime subscription for $300 if your wallet's just bursting at the seams. It'll give you a membership for as long as you live on this planet. Or if we terraform another planet, maybe. That too. Either way, you're supporting me and a ton of other creators, and you're getting exclusive content and a premium streaming experience. So win-win-win. So yeah, links down in the description, or just scan that QR code to get started. Thank you. All right, thank you so much for watching. If this is your first time here, maybe check out this video. It's a non-lightning round video, or maybe just check out last week's video since half the questions on this one referred back to that one anyway. But anyway, check that out. Look at any of them that might be suggested to you on the side over here by the algorithm. And if you're not subscribed, I invite you to subscribe. I come back with videos every Monday. Big thanks again to my Patreon supporters and channel members for the questions that are in this and for the community that you guys have formed. I can't thank you guys enough. You are the bread and butter of this channel, community. It's a good thing. But I think that's it for now. You guys go out there, have an eye-opening rest of the week. Stay safe, and I'll see you next Monday. Love you guys. Take care.